Good morning, everybody. Let's see what we have here. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind, but now I see. If you check in your missals and you see that song, and underneath you discover that the man who wrote it, his name is John Newton, and he lived from 1725 to 1807. And really, if you take the time to reflect upon that story, the story of that song, it's really a story of rescue. The rescue of an individual. John Newton grew up in England. He grew up in initially a regular family. But he got involved in bad stuff, okay? That's how he describes himself. He says, a wretch like me. That is, he became the captain of a slave trading ship. And so he was bringing slaves from Africa to the East Indies. And you're very familiar with that story and how difficult it was and how those individuals, those slaves, were literally treated like cargo. They were treated like animals. And this is what he was involved in. John Newton was involved for years, okay? And he relished what he was doing. And then he was involved in a shipwreck. And after that shipwreck, all of a sudden, you could say that things began to change in his life. He became aware of the fact of the insanity of what he had been doing. He became aware of the fact that he was God's child and that he needed to act accordingly. And so over a gradual period of time, he quit what he was doing. He became what we call he can't get the word out, but he fought for the abolition of the slave trade. And for himself, he became, not alone did he convert, but he became an Episcopal priest. And as an Episcopal priest, then he and another guy wrote this Amazing Grace and many other religious songs. So his story, it's a story of transition. It's a story of transition from darkness to light. He was, as I say, a bad man, and he became completely different. He attributes all of it not to any doing on himself. Rather, he feels that God was the one who saved him and called him into a newness of life. Where he says, I once was lost, but now I am found. I was blind, but now I see. So a story of transitions. And in many ways, that story helps you make more sense out of the gospel reading today, because that also is a story of transitions. It's a wonderful story, that gospel season, and it's presented as a sort of a drama consisting of several scenes where this blind man recovered his sight, and he was brought from one individual to another, okay? But in the process, you find that he moved in his life. He moved from physical blindness to spiritual sight, because at the end of the story, he encountered the Lord again, and the Lord invited him into a newness of life. Meanwhile, as he was making the transition to a life of holiness and a life of light, you find the religious people of the day, meaning the Pharisees, were going in the opposite direction. Because they were the religious people of the day. But if you follow the story, they went from being religious people, they ended up in darkness themselves, where they couldn't accept the fact that this individual had actually received his sight from God. So it is a very powerful story. It's a very powerful story of transitions, of an individual in a sense, hearing that call of God and responding to it in a meaningful way. And on the other hand, how religious people, if we're not careful, can end up in the wrong place ourselves. I think it's a wonderful story for catechumens, because you also, those of you who are catechumens, you also are on a journey, okay? And hopefully for you also, it's a journey from darkness to light. And that's what the light really at the end of the tunnel is none other than Christ himself, whom you will meet in a special way on Holy Saturday night when you make your covenant with the Lord himself. In the meantime, you also are on a journey. And I think it's important to realize, first of all, where you've come from, where you're going, and to realize that the very fact that you're on this journey is not just because of who you are, it's because the Lord is calling you into a newness of life with him. And a little later, we're having what we call the scrutinies here at this Mass. It's an opportunity to look at the possibility of sinfulness in your own life, how we're all guilty of it, and also how we need to overcome it with God's help. And finally, I think the story today is not just a story for catechumens. I think it's a story for the entire church. That is, we are all on a journey. We're not there. And in our own lives, if we're honest, there is that certain amount of darkness. We're all guilty of sin at a certain level. And because of that, that's really what we do during this Lenten season. It's a time to, in a sense, look inward, to reflect upon where we've come from, where we're going, and to realize that at the end of the day, the Lord is always calling us to do better. And consequently, along those lines, tomorrow evening, we have our Lenten penance service. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a full church? I know we won't have a full church, but wouldn't it be wonderful that as many of you as possible would show up tomorrow evening, because we're going to have about 10 or 11 or 12 priests there. So it's an opportunity for you again to acknowledge your sinfulness and to ask the Lord's peace, pardon and peace in your lives. So today, as we journey through this transition, if you will, from darkness to light, realize that we are doing it, but ultimately it's the Lord who is doing it in our individual lives. Amen.